Welcome back to educator.com. For the next lesson, we're going to go over simple interest. Now, simple interest has to do with savings account. Okay? When you take money and you want to save it, you take it to the bank and you put it into the savings account. That money that you deposit, that you put into the bank, is the principal. So the initial amount, the money that you have, that you give to the bank, is called the principal. Okay? Deposit just means you putting in, so you're going to put it into the savings account. Now, because you're giving it to the bank uses that money and they try to make more money. Since they're using your money, it's like them borrowing your money, they end up paying you what's called interest. So, interest is the money the bank pays you based on the interest rate. So, again, you take your money, you put in the bank in a savings account to try to save the money, and the bank pays you money just for putting your money into their bank. So that's interest. Interest is also money. It's the money earned, the money the bank paid you, the amount the bank paid you. Interest rate is the percent. So they're going to give you a percent of that money. So this is in percent. That's the interest rate. Simple interest is a type of interest. So it's when only based on the principal, so only based on the initial deposit, the amount that you first deposit. Okay, when they calculate the interest only based on that money, that's called simple interest. There's going to be different types of interest. We're only going to go over simple interest. Okay, so simple, again, is when the bank pays you interest based on just the principal amount. Okay? So the formula for the simple interest is the principal, so how much you deposit, times the rate, okay, the percent the bank is going to pay you, and T for time, so number of years that they're going to pay you. So PRT means P times R times T, the principal times the rate times the time. So you're going to multiply those three together, and that's going to give you the amount that you earned in interest, how much you made, okay, from the bank. So interest, again, is in dollars, right? Because if you're making that money, then it's in dollars, right? The principal, again, it's money, so dollars. The rate is the percent. And T for time, okay, in years. So if it's 2 years, then the T is going to be 2. 5 years, T is 5. Now, since the bank is paying you, right? The bank is paying you percent, you would want a higher percent, right? So the higher the percent, the greater your interest, how much you're going to make. Okay, so just keep all that in mind. I equals PRT. P times R times T. So let's go through our examples. Find the simple interest. So P, the principal, is $200. The formula again is I, the interest, equals P times R times T. Okay, so then I, amount that you make, is in dollars. P is in dollars. Rate is in percent. T is in years. Principal, the amount that you deposit, is $200. I want to find the interest, so I is what I'm looking for. Equals P, which is 200, R. Now, remember, since R is in percent, anytime you use a percent to solve something out, you have to change it to decimal. We can't solve out any numbers that's in percent form. So we have to change it to decimal form. Okay, so 10%, remember percent to decimal, think of it as the number has to get smaller because decimals are small. So 10%, I have to move it 2 spaces, the decimal point 2 spaces over to the left because that's going to make the number smaller. So from here, I'm going to go 1, 2. Remember the decimal point, if you don't see 1, it's always at the end of the number. So you're going to go 1 space, 2 spaces. So it's going to be 0.10 or 0.1. Remember when the 0 is at the end of a number behind the decimal point, then it's nothing. You can just drop it. So it'll be 0.1 or 0.10. It's the same thing. So I can write 0.10 times t. Well, how many years? 12 years. Okay, now I wrote these numbers in parentheses. That means multiply. Okay, so if you have a bunch of parentheses together like that, that means multiply. The reason why I don't use x, the x symbol for times, since we're using variables, you don't want to use that little x to represent times because x can be a variable. So now you want to just write it either in parentheses. Actually, that's the only way you should do it if you're multiplying numbers together, okay? So how do I find the interest? Well, I have to just multiply these numbers together, right? So 200 times 0.10. 200 times 0.1. Remember 0.1? I just want to make the number smaller. So again, since this is zeros at the end of a number behind the decimal point, I can just drop it, right? So 0.1. So this is 0, 0, 2. How many numbers do I have behind decimal points? 1. So then I'm going to start at the end here. I'm going to go in 1 space. So it'll be 20.0. Again, the 0 is at the end of a number behind the decimal point, so I can just drop it. So this is actually the same thing as 20. So 200 times 0.10 was 20. So then I have to now multiply the 12. So 20 times 12. 0 times 2 is 0. 2 times 2 is 4. Put a 0 right here. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 2 is 2. Need to add. 0 plus 2 is 2. 4 plus 0 is 4. 0 plus 0 is 0. Okay, so then the interest is going to be $240. So over 12 years, you're going to be making this much money. Find the simple interest earned over 5 years when the principal is $500 and the interest rate is 5%. Okay, so the time. We know that this is time because it's saying over 5 years. T equals 5 years. It makes it easier if you're just going to write down what each variable is. Okay? Principal is 500. So P is $500. The interest rate is 5%. So it's not I, right? I is the amount that you earned or amount that you have. Rate, the interest rate is the percent. So look for this number rate. So R equals 5%. Okay, well the interest, simple interest equals the principal, PRT, 500 times R, which is, again, 5%. Change it to a decimal, so it's going to go from here, 1, 2, 0.05. And then time. How many years? 5 years. So $500 times the rate 0.05, and then for 5 years. So I need to just multiply those three out. 500 times 0.05, 0 times 5, 0, 0, 25. And then here, 0 times all these, it just all becomes zeros. Okay, so if you want, you can just write them in. It's not going to change. So then it's going to be 2, 5, 0, 0. Now from these two numbers, how many numbers do I have behind the decimal point? I have 2. So then I'm going to go to this side. I'm going to go 1, 2. This is 25, right? Zeros are at the end of a number behind the decimal point. So 500 times 0.05 is 25. That's actually $25. So then this is actually saying, well, the principal, how much you deposit, how much you put in, times the interest rate, this is how much they're going to pay you, $25 per year. Okay, because it's when you multiply that, that just becomes 1 year. But then since you have 5 years, you're going to take the $25 and you're going to multiply it by 5 because they're going to pay you for 5 years. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 2 is 10 plus 2 is 12. So no decimal points or numbers behind decimal points. So 125 is my interest earned. So the amount that I make is $125. This is how much the bank is paying me, okay, for putting $500 into the account for 5 years with 5% interest. Then this is how much I make in those 5 years. Okay. The next example, Samantha deposited $100 into a savings account with an interest rate of 2%. Find how much simple interest she earned over 8 years. Okay, so she took $100 into the bank. That's 100. The interest rate is 2%. So the rate R, it's not I, even though it's interest rate, it starts with an I, but it's the rate, is 2%. How many years? The time is 8 years. That means she put in $100 into the savings account for 8 whole years. She left it in there for 8 years, so that bank had to pay her for all 8 years. Okay, so then, again, I'm solving for I equals the principal, 100, times the rate, 2%, change it to decimal. Start at the end, you're going to go 1, 2. Okay, be careful, 2% is not 0.2. It's 0.02 because you have to fill in that space. 0.02 times 8 years. So if I multiply just the principal times the rate, that's going to give me how much I'm going to make in 1 year. So that's why I have to multiply it by 8, because they have to pay Samantha interest for all 8 years, right? So it's times 8. 100 times 0.02. Okay, 0, 0, 2. And then again, 0 multiplying by all that is nothing. So it just becomes that. If you want, you can join all your zeros. You add it, 200. See, it's the same thing. So whenever you have a 0 that you have to multiply to all the numbers, it's just nothing. It's just zeros. It doesn't change anything. Okay, so then how many numbers do I have behind decimal points? I have 2, so I'm going to start here and go 1, 2. So it's $2. 2.00, these zeros you just drop because it's at the end of a number and it's behind the decimal point. There's a shortcut you can do whenever you're multiplying by 100 or 10 or 1,000, like any multiple of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, okay, one with a bunch of zeros. you can move the decimal point however many zeros there are. So since there's 2 zeros here for 100, you can move this to make it bigger, because remember when you multiply, you tend to make the numbers bigger. Then you just move this over 1, 2 spaces. Let's say you're multiplying this number by 10. Well, 10 only has 1 0, so then you would move the decimal point over once. If you're multiplying it by 1,000, you have 3 zeros, then you would have to move the decimal point over 3 times 0, and then you fill in that extra space with a 0. Okay, that's a shortcut. So this is going to be 2, right? So this was 2 times the 8. So 2 times 8 we know is 16. I equals 16. So put the dollar sign in there. Interest is always in money, how much you made. Okay, that means the bank, by Samantha putting $100 into the savings account at the bank and then paying her 2% of that 100 for 8 years, she's going to end up making a total of $16. Now let's say we want to find out how much she has overall. She has total. She left the money into the bank, right? So the bank has her $100. The bank also paid her $16. So how much is she going to have in all? She's going to have that 100 of her money that she put in the bank, and that $16 that the bank paid her. So in all, to find the total amount that she has, you can just do principal, how much she deposited, plus the amount that she earned, right? So that's $100 plus the $16. How much is she going to have in all? 116. Okay, that's just to see how much she has in all, how much total, amount that she deposited plus the amount that she made from the bank, and then that'll be her total. So it has to be greater than the principal amount, right? If it's a savings account, because she made money, so then her remaining balance has to be greater than how much she had put in, right? Okay, and then let's go over one more example. If the simple interest earned in 4 years is $10 and the interest rate is 3%, how much is the principal? Okay, so look what they're asking for. They're asking how much is the principal. So they're asking for the P. The simple interest earned in 4 years is $10. So simple interest, that's I, is how much? $10. The rate is 3%. How many years? 4 years. Okay, now this seems really difficult because you're used to solving for I, right? The formula, it has you solving for I. I equals PRT. And they're asking for a P. They give you the I, and they're asking you for the P. Now, whenever they do this, it's okay. Just all you have to do is follow the formula. Just plug in the numbers, okay, according to where it is in the formula. So I, we have I. We know what I is. I is 10. So then write 10 instead of I. Equals, now P is what we're looking for, right? So leave in P because we don't know what P is. R. R is 3%. So we can replace R. 3% becomes 0.03. And then T time is 4. Okay. So this looks pretty difficult, right? Well, I know that I have this and this that I have to multiply because it's times. Parentheses means times, right? So p times this times this. Well, I can't multiply p times all this number, right? Because it's a variable. But I can multiply this and this together, right? So 4 times, you know what? Let me just do it the other way. 0.03 times the 4. 3 times 4 is 12. 0 plus 1 is 1. How many numbers are there behind decimal points? 2. So you start here, you go 1, 2. There's my number, 0.12. So it's as if this whole thing right here, when I multiply these two numbers together, it gave me 0.12. So let me just write it again and write 0.12 instead of that number. It's still p times this number, right? But then because I can solve these two out, it's just multiplied together, well, then I can solve it out, and that's 0.12, right? Then how do I solve for p? This is also 0.12 times p. How do I solve for p? Remember my example? If I have 6 equal to p times 3, I know that p is 2 because 2 times 3 is 6. I can also say that 6 divided by 3 is p, right? So I can take this number and divide it by this number. So I can take 10 and divide it by 0.12. So if I take 10 divided by 0.12, I can solve for p. I can figure out what my p is. So to multiply or divide decimals, if you have a decimal on the outside, you have numbers behind it besides zeros. Then you go 1, 2, you move to 2 spaces because we have to get rid of the decimal point. Then decimal point here is at the end. I have to go 1, 2, right? Decimal points right there. Fill these in with zeros. Bring it straight up. So 12 goes into 10, 0 times. 12 goes into 100. Let's see. Well, I'm going to try to say 8. So 12, let me just do it. Let's do it over here. 12, let's see, 12 times 8 is 16. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Now, you can just guess and check. So you can try guessing 5, you can try guessing 10, and then see what the best number would be. Okay, so 12 times 8, it's over this 0, right, is 96. Subtract it. 100 minus 96 is going to be 4. Bring down the 0. 12 goes into 40. How many times? 12 times 3 is 6. Okay, 36. 12 times 4 is 48. Well, this one's too big, right? So then I know that it has to be the 3. So plug in the 3 in here. That's 36. Subtract it. That's 4. If I subtract it, I can bring down a 0. And I can divide it again. So that's also 3. 36, 4. Look, it's a repeating number. 0, 3. Okay. Now, here, I can stop. I know I'm going to probably keep getting the same number, 3. It's a repeating number. But I can stop here because I'm dealing with money. I'm looking for principal, okay? If I'm looking for principal, then it has to be in money. Well, money, we know that there's only 2 numbers behind the decimal point, right? Because that's how much cents there are, or pennies there are, right? So 83.33 would be the same thing as $83.33. So P, when I divide this number by this number, I get $83.33. So let's go over what I just did. This problem gave me time, gave me the simple interest. So they gave me I. They gave me the interest rate, and they're asking for the principal. So I just listed out what I'm looking for and what was given to me. Then I plug everything into the formula. So I substitute in these numbers in for these variables. So the interest rate is $10, so I'm going to put in 10 instead of I, equals P I don't know, so I'm going to leave the P. R I know is 3%, so I change it to a decimal, put it in as R. And then T I know is 4, so I'm going to put in 4 instead of the T. There's my equation. Okay, again, I'm solving for P, right? So here, I can multiply, because everything is multiplied together, P times R times T. Since I can't multiply P times a number, I can do number times a number. These two I can multiply together. That's what I did. Multiply them, get 0.12. Then, to find what P is, remember if we have this example, I can do this number divided by the 3. So I'm going to do 10 divided by 0.12. And you just divide it. When you divide it, make sure you move the decimal point over twice. So you have to move this decimal point over twice, bring it up, divide it, and you end up getting $83.33. So that's the principal. That's how much was deposited to make $10 with a 3% interest over 4 years. Okay, that's how much was put into the bank. Okay? Okay, well that's it for this lesson. Thank you for watching educator.com.